Hi, my name's Barry Anderson, and I'm the producer, songwriter, guitar player, and singer for the metal band Barren Ruins. And this is video number 17, based on how to earn national and international ranking and win international awards. Now, video number 17 is going to be a continuation of my approach of music theory. I'm going to finish up with the circle of fifths and how I use that, and then I'm going to play a song that I wrote using music theory and writing songs in a traditional sense and how a lot of songwriters write. It's not how I normally write, but that's what we're going to do tonight. Now, tonight's video, video number 17, is going to be an extension on my view of music theory and how I use it. Tonight we're going to be going into the circle of fifths and how I use the circle of fifths, and how other bands use a circle of fifths. And then I'm going to play a song that I wrote using music theory. I normally don't do that. I usually just grab guitar and start playing and letting it rip and letting my natural ability just take over, and I just play. But tonight we're gonna just write a song and play a song that I wrote using music theory. So let's look at the circle of fifths. Now I'm going to put a diagram of the circle of fifths. That's common. You can go and Google search the circle of fifths. There's tons of great videos on it and how other musicians normally will use a circle of fifths. I don't do anything normally, so I use a little different approach. But if you want to learn how other bands and other musicians use a circle of fifths, there's a lot of great videos out there. But let's look at the circle of fifths and how I use it, and basically how some of the other bands use it. Let's take G major, which is the scale and mode system that we went into in the last video, video number 16, that went into theory and scales and the modes. So under normal circumstances, if you were following the modes from a G major, you would go to an E minor, which is the sixth mode of the G major scales and mode system. It's an Eonian, and that's a minor scale and a minor chord. But let's just say you wanted to throw a monkey wrench in and you wanted to play E major. You'd need to use the fifth chord of the E major, which would normally be a B major. And I say normally because it doesn't always work out that you'll use a major chord to bring you back to a major fifth chord like a B major to bring you back to an E major. I don't always use a major chord, but in this instance we're just going to do what, say, a band like the Beatles used to do in their early recordings, going from a G major to a B major to an E major, and get you back to a G major. We got to go to a D major. Now the Beatles did throw a little different color into that system. They used sevenths on that fifth chord, so they would use a B with a seventh on it, so they would go like this. Now you can tell that has the Beatle tonality and sound. That's not even a Beatles song. That's just their approach. And, you know, when you've had music theory and a lot of formal training, you'll basically learn how to do that. But that's basically how the Beatles used it, and there's a lot of other bands that do that. That seventh gave the Beatles an original, identifiable sound in their early recordings. And a lot of bands do still use that. They're not as aggressive on that seventh. They will kind of mix that out a little bit, but they do at times use it, not normally in the lower registers, but in the higher registers or the higher strings to give it that sound. But that's the Beatles sound. Now for myself, let's say I was playing a main theme, and this is from a song that I'm working on that's going to be in our next CD. It's in E minor. that's the main theme on the verse, but the bridge has an F dominant second on it, and we want to come back to that E minor, so we're going to need to use the B, and I'm going to play both the B minor and a B major chord to bring me back to the E minor, just to give you an idea of that you can basically use both of them, but it has a lot to do with how you phrase it. So now let's do the major chord. Now this is out of the normal realm. I mean, there is no absolutely hardcore law or rule that you have to follow in theory, but normally to bring you back to a minor chord, you would use a minor fifth chord. So if you're going to an E minor, you normally would use the B minor instead of the B major. So let's use the B major and see how that works. So they both can work. It really depends on how you're phrasing, if it's a lead break or if it's, basic vocals, if you're going to have a harmony guitar underneath, or maybe some big orchestral strings, or even multiple melodies within that phrasing to bring it back to the main theme in the E minor. Again, it really is experimentation, and my view of it is if it sounds good, do it. That E minor really sounds totally different when you use the B major instead of the B minor. It gives it a different tonality, a different dynamic, and it's really about what you're looking to accomplish in that transition. I personally like the B major myself on that particular transition, but every song is different, and you just got to go with it and experiment, because that's what really writing is about, is experimentation. Now we're going to play a song that I played and wrote using theory. Now I like to use common notes within the chord progressions when I'm writing songs. If you listen to them, I use a lot of multiple melodies within the chord progression, but I always like to use a common note. In the intro on this song, the common note is the number 1 string, it's the high string, it's a high E string, and 3 of the 4 chords on the intro uses that. So it goes. Now you have basically an E major, an F sharp minor, which is not using that open E, an F sharp minor with a 7th that's using the open E, and you have a B major with an 11th, which is using that open E. So it goes. Let's do that again. Now I overemphasized that open E, but it would be normally just like that. You wouldn't play it quite that loud, but I wanted to emphasize it so you could hear that open E. Again, it's really how hard you hit the strings. Jazz guys use a lot of really different chords, and they really perfect the approach of how loud to play a 7th or 11th or a 9th to fit the song. They really have that major touch, and it's the same thing with classical guitar players. They use a lot of really unusual chords and chord structures, and it's about knowing how hard to hit that 7th or 9th or 11th to really give it that sweet sound yet fit within the chord structure that they're playing. So that's the beginning of this song. It's in an E major, F sharp minor, F sharp minor with the 7th, B major with an 11th. Now the main theme or verse is just basically an E major scale. I start on the 2nd, which is a little different. Again, the common note is an open E, but that's the 6th string, and it goes from the 2nd to the 3rd, 3rd to the 4th, 7th to the 8th, 6th to the 7th, and then an open E. It goes something like this. So we're muting it, but we're using that open E. So the intro used the number 1 string, and the verse is using the open E on the number 6 string. So the beginning part goes like. Now all that is a scale, and I do that a lot within the phrasing. I'm using scales, but I'm using them in a melodic or melody-based system, and just basically changing a rhythm and trying to have an original rhythm to that scale. Really, that's all that is, and that's pretty much all I really do. But I use a melody. Everything I do is based on melody. Now the chorus is just an A major, and it's an A major with an A, G sharp, E, C sharp, A, D sharp, B. So that's just basically an A chord and a B chord, and then a B, C sharp, E, F sharp, and then an E major, and an A with a 9th, because it's 2 common notes, the E and the B string. Again, E. Similar to what the intro is. So let's play the chorus. Again, I like to use those common notes with the open E and the B on that, on the chorus, just between the E and the A and the B. Now, it sounds a little funky when they're played by themselves, but if it's phrased right and you hit the strings at the right impact and volume within the phrasing structure, it sounds okay. It actually really works, and I like that sound. So now the bridge is a little different. Again, I'm going to be using an A 9th. This is a B minor with a 7th, 9th, and 11th. This is a D 9th and an E major. Again, they sound a little funky by themselves, but if you play them together, it goes kind of like this. That's basically the song. So we're going to play the whole thing from start to finish. Just do half a rotation of the verse and the chorus, and the bridge, just to give you an idea how it all flows together. But I like to use common notes, like I said, to tie everything together, to give it a little different sound for myself, to make it more original so people can identify it. They sometimes don't really hear it clearly, and the way I mix it has a lot to do with that, but it still creates a different mode, a different sound, a different tonality, and it makes it sound original. So let's start from the beginning here. Anyway, that's how I use theory to write. Now, I do that when I'm arranging songs. I usually don't start a project and think about the theory of it. I start and I just start playing. That was in the video 18. I actually dropped 18 yesterday before 17 because I had some people that actually wanted me to do that. I don't know if they thought I could or couldn't or whatever, but it was like a challenge, and I'm always up for a challenge. But that's how I write, using theory, and I do that when I'm arranging songs. But you get a really good lick or a really good guitar part, and it's pretty easy to throw the rest of it together, just coming up with a good chorus or a good bridge, throwing the lead breaks in, and then for me, I always do the vocals and then the lyrics last. That's just my approach. A lot of songwriters start with the lyrics, and then they write the melody, and then they put the chord progressions behind that. Everybody has their own system, and you have to approach that with, number one, what works for you, number two, what you have the most experience with. And when you're writing with bands, you have to kind of adapt your approach to fit their style. Now, my brother Randall is a very original keyboard player. He doesn't really play keyboard like everyone else because he's a guitar player first. So he does approach keyboards a little more like a guitar player would. And Ed, the drummer, is an extraordinarily gifted and original drummer. He approaches everything totally different, and I never know what he's going to come up with because it's going to be totally unique and totally different. But that's my approach on how I use music theory. For me, music theory is really a secondary thought because I just naturally play and write. But there are a lot of successful people that use music theory first.